talking about, like how politicians will say, will focus on, things that aren't really not important, but things that aren't bread and butter. So
Yeah.
I was watching The Prodigal Son
Yeah.
for the second time this weekend. So this time
Thank
around, I
you.
was actually watching it with my aunt.
Thank you.
And you say something where you're like, like politicians will be like, you deserve better healthcare, you
Yeah.
deserve
Yeah.
better roads. And
Yeah.
you're like, we know. Show us
Yeah.
how. So
Yeah.
I think first of all, I wanted to talk. I'm so excited about this segment. I
Yeah.
hope I contain my excitement because why I wanted to have you here.
Yeah.
So you guys will know King Kandoro. He had his very latest stand up, The Prodigal Son. Which you did live in Harare last year. I know you did like a Bulawayo version,
Yes.
but
Yes.
then the
Yeah.
one that was filmed was in Harare. And
Yeah.
I'm correct in saying it's your second because the first one was conspiracy theories, right?
Yes. Yes.
And then
Yes.
this was your second. And honestly, I'm not just saying this. I really enjoyed it. I'll always
Thank you.
tell you stuff. I'll always
Yeah. Thank
so
you.
I really enjoyed it. And what I loved about The Prodigal Son is just you can literally see the growth. My type of comedy, stand-up comedy that I like is your Trevor Noah, your Chris Rock. People that say something, you laugh, but then people that say something, you're like, actually,
Yeah.
like Chris Rock, you'll remember that he says there's a difference between being an N-word and a black person.
Yeah.
There's certain things that he says that you'll remember. So I'm a fan of Paul Mooney. I don't know if you're familiar with Paul Mooney.
I mean, if you're a fan of Dave Chappelle, you know from
Paul Mooney is he is offensively brilliant. Rest in peace, Paul Mooney. So that's my type of politics that makes you think. And more recently, Dave Chappelle. So like with Dave Chappelle, when he started out, I was okay with him. But then now the Dave Chappelle that makes you think, and he weaves a story, and that's what I saw from The Prodigal Son. Personally, just how you started, and just the whole. No, I absolutely loved it. I loved the themes and the fact that you're not. I mean, you've always not been afraid to talk about politics, but I think just the way that you that you did it. What I wanted to ask from you was just, I know there's some people who are watching who are big fans and watch The Prodigal Son. What was that process like? Like, when did the idea come about that, okay, this is what I'm going to do, considering that we're in a pandemic and things were not clear? But so when did you have the idea, and how long did it take for that to materialize? I'm interested in the process of making The Prodigal.
To be honest, I don't know when. I know when I decided to do the show, but so the thing with the pandemic, right, is that it gave us a very unprecedented time with our thoughts and feelings, and like we were devoid of any kind of like, so I spent a lot of time with it was just me and my wife at the time, and I was in a foreign land, so you're having all this. It was a very unique experience to be in. Gave me time to kind of like just go through, kind of like retrospect. Oh, this is what I've done. It was an opportunity to look back, and then my son came along. That shifted dynamics. So The Prodigal Son ended up, it definitely. I think the thought had already been there. I would want to do something like that, but suddenly when I knew for certain that I was going to Zim, like as soon as we logged in those travel plans, I was like, okay, now that I know, but it also wasn't there wasn't a pressure within me to, because throughout the pandemic, whenever I had a funny thought, I would write it down. So these things would come to me very sporadically. Like my wife would say something and I would say, like, the things that I say, she said to me, she actually did say, like, not, and that's been the fortunate thing about me stand-up wise. I've had the fortune of never having to come up with a joke. And what I mean by that is with comedians, and sometimes you can tell as an audience, like, okay, this is a joke that's been, somebody has come up with that. Like when somebody's talking about, there's certain experiences that we talk about that almost feel generic, like, oh, how you guys, you women do that. I'm like, this is a generic, like most of the things that I talk about are things that have, not most, in some shape or form, they've happened to me, either me or to my family, and I've been told the story or I was involved somewhere. So when it comes from that place of this thing happened, when the story is that solid, right? The results are almost guaranteed, right? So now the struggle, the responsibility comes to, okay, how can I make this story mean more than it actually is? So you find like that smooch, that ice cream story happened to me in 2018, right? And I've told that story before, but now in the context of this show now, it meant more because the implication now it's linked to a story about my ancestors. It's a story, what was important with the Prodigal Son is trying to ask myself, okay, in the past 2 years, what have I learned? Who have I become? That's where the name Prodigal Son, this is a story about coming back home. There are questions to me about, religion, about my place as a son, as a father, finding my footing. Where am I? These are my insecurities. That story about my family consulting a prophet, that actually happened. But it was a story, it was now, okay, how can I make this story mean more? Mm-hmm. Because it can't just be a story. I can't just be standing on stage clowning my family for your guys' laughter. That would be cruel. Yeah. If that story had just ended up being a ridiculous story about us, I don't know what my relationship with my father would be. But he appreciates the fact that he's being used in an analogy about ZANU-PF fuck-ups. Yeah. So it's like, okay, I can let this one go. So it's things like that. I and with my stand-up, I always try to let the ideas go wherever they go. And like right now, I'll just be writing like, okay, this is okay. Whenever it happens, I don't know what the year will bring, but at some point, these things will just fully form, okay, this is where we're going. And then it ends up being something like conspiracy theories. It ends up being something like Prodigal Son. Mm-hmm. But thank you so much for it's very flattering to be in that conversation, because I really look up to everyone that you've mentioned, and I hope to one day be in a position to be in the same room with those guys.
You will, which is why I have on the podcast now, because I realized that yesterday's prize is not today's prize.
Yes. No. So but you guys will always be family, so.
Kandoro, hey! Those ones where you're like, and aside, I won't mention the person's name. Let me just say my fave. I think you'll get who I'm saying. So I was trying to have them on the podcast. This is a while back. So I hit them up. Hey, I was like, oh, hey, like, oh yeah. You know what? But speak to so and so. They have a diary. And then it took me another few months. Wow. But it sounds like I have to get you. Okay, but I just want to go back to the writing process, right? Yeah. I saw that your wife put up
the
behind the scenes, like where you had all these sheets of paper and you're actually writing. So what's your methods? Like, look like you are physically writing. Do you physically write, then you type out, then you put on your phone? Like, what's the writing process? And also, I'm interested in the length of time it took from first draft to when you kind of felt like, okay, this is it.
So the reason why I write jokes so that I remember the form that they are funny in. So when I'm writing it down, it's not so much that I'm writing down the jokes, is that I'm writing it from memory. So like right now, I'll have like something will happen, and then from the premise, sentences will just, and the problem with me is that I get overexcited when something is funny. And if I don't write it down, it ends up shifting because I end up finding a new punchline. So when I write it down, it's to tell myself like, okay, move on. We've gleaned all we can from this. Let's put it down. This is how this joke exists. Let's move on. And the reason why I write down on, I don't know where I am now, right? Because I used to write down on paper because it felt real to write it down. Then I would, with conspiracy theories, all of it was written down on paper. And then with this one, I wrote it down on paper, then I typed it into my computer. And then when I was typing, I was like, yo, this is so much better. Because the thing with typing it now is that if I change and thought I can just backspace and whatever, the thing with pen and paper is that it looks messy. And then with it just looks neat. So I probably, and it's there's a danger with losing paper once you, but it felt very old school, just writing it down on paper and whatever. But it probably exists as a mixture of both, maybe just thoughts that I have written down, scribbled wherever, then put down on, because I like the concept of having like just a script from the top down. But most of these jokes were written at different points. So the thoughts about my son, like, oh, that came at a different time. The thing with my wife, where the writing mostly comes, it's how to make this a seamless story. How do we, how do we link? Because everything existed individually. So the stuff about that thing about 3 big blessings, they were not 3 big blessings, they were just things that happened to me. I was like, oh, this makes sense, as you know, because that's what I actually realized. You don't initially, when I was thinking about it, I was like, okay, this is where, so everything ends up going where it's meant to go. The bit about Mbuyane Handa, I wrote that about after the Blawai show. The bit about Nick Mangwana was freestyled on stage. The bit about, the first thing that I probably wrote was the bit about the royal family. That happened as soon as I got to England. I was like, man, this is ridiculous. So the thing about the whole royal family, Meghan, that was probably the first thing. And, you know, the whole ancestors' electricity, because that actually happened. Electricity actually went. I was like, what is happening? So it's those kind of things. It was just now a matter of course I don't like when people say like, oh, I'm about to do milk jokes now. Oh, I'm doing ZANU-PF jokes now. Or they kind of like announce I just want to hear the joke and almost be caught unawares and almost, oh, okay, well, this is ZANU-PF now. Oh, okay, I want it to be a proper journey where if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you're still having fun because this feels like a well thought out show. I want it to feel like, and I've always enjoyed comedy that makes you feel smart at the end of the day. Yeah. Where you look at the person sitting next to you and you're like, you're not funny, you're not laughing because you're not smart, you know. In an arrogant way. That's how I've always, because like when I watch some of these people, I'm like, oh, I got that because I'm also intelligent. So it's I've always tried to replicate that where it's, you know, there's different layers And some of the things that make me really laugh are things that, because of the way the show is written, only I could possibly get. Like, I'm realizing now, like, there's something that it wasn't even intentional. But I wish, there's two things that I wish I had done with Prodigal Son that I had been conscious of, but they were accidental. The first thing is the whole how far thing.
Yeah.
That went out of it. Like, it wasn't supposed, like the way it kept popping up, that was intentional. Really? That was, yeah, like it was just supposed to be a once-off joke about that whole how far thing. But, you know, if I had been conscious of it, it would have been dope. But the other thing is, if you realize the show is almost like it's a story about growth, personal growth, or personal changes on a fundamental level, right? Because I start the show by saying the whole how we speak thing, the whole how far, the whole music, what hip hop means to me.
007.
Right? Yeah, exactly. That's how I say it. And that's how I speak, right? But if you notice, there is a juxtaposition with the David Chifunyise joke and the Tanto Wave joke, where I say David Chifunyise always said, you know, to punctuate sentence. If you go watch it again, even before I start that sentence until the middle of the show, I'm punctuating every sentence by saying, you know. Every sentence.
And did you mean to do that, or?
So it wasn't a conscious thing, right, that I did, but it's now speaking to that thing where when I was writing the show, these are things that I was writing into the show, but I failed to explain it. I failed to explain it adequately because I wasn't actively conscious of it, to say, this is the extent of how I've changed. Do you get it? Like, I'm coming from when that didn't apply to me then, but because of my life experiences now, I'm part of those people that punctuate these sentences by saying, you know, because of all the things that have kind of happened to me. But at the same time, it still hasn't changed who I am. So it's almost like a thing where, from the outside looking in, you think these things dictate who people who speak like this are meant to be these people. But here you are speaking that same way, but you're still this person, you know? So it's things like that where you're like, I was pleasantly surprised when I realized when we were editing, I was like, oh, snap. This is how, I wonder who else is picking up on this.
Yeah. And you know, one of the, so like I said, I was watching it for the second time with my aunt. And literally we were having, so that your DSTV joke, I felt it on a personal level, because I was one of those people, because I was raised by my grandparents and we lived in a plot. And by the time I was like, DSTV was becoming a thing, all the young adults had flew the nest. So it was literally me and my grandparents. They didn't care as long as they had ZBC, or like my grandfather would listen to BBC World Service on the radio. DSTV, what? An extra bill. So, and I would always be like, I want DSTV. But like you, anytime I'd go to my cousin's place, generation, I would sit in front of that thing.
Passions.
And what, even the adverts, like, so literally when you were saying it, I was like, this is my life. And then when you go to school and then people talk about it, and then they talk about, oh, remember when this, and you're like, yes.
Exactly.
I love it. And funny enough, so it caused a bonding moment with my aunt, because she had a similar experience where for some time, because of the school that she was going to, because she went to convent in Bulawayo, so she lived with her grandmother, right? Because it was sort of nearer, it was easier to do. And then she would go to her parents, my grandparents' weekends. So her gogo, didn't have TV, right?
Oh,
but then
so coming to you was her come up.
So coming to her parents, my grandparents was the TV. So she was like, she would watch everything, Santa Barbara, everything. So by the time she went back to school, and because she was going to a school with like white people and everything, then she would talk about, oh, Cruz did this or whatever. So we had like that bonding moment where I was like, mine was DSTV and hers was just simply having a TV. So I thought that was fantastic. And I wanted to ask you about the bearer's check joke. How was that moment when people just started singing along?
It's goosebumps. Like you. So let me tell you a secret, right? Let me tell you a secret. The only way the DSTV joke was going to happen is if people sang along to the bearer check song. That was the only way. That was the basis of the DSTV joke. There was no other way it would have happened. It was only going to happen if people had sang. If they hadn't sang, because it was meant to create a moment where there is people who sing and people who don't, because they don't get it. So when I was thinking of, because the DSTV joke happened in it happened in Bulawayo on the 22nd of December, which was Unity Day. So when I entered the show, I was singing, let's preach unit. So I had written it into, the DSTV joke was a response to that because I knew people were going to sing back. But now it was the 24th, I couldn't do let's preach unit. So I was like, you know what? When we get to this point, this Nick Mangwana point, what comes first? When we get to the Nick Mangwana point, I'm going to, whatever I say is going to lead me to sing that Beera Check song. And depending on the reaction, it was a beautiful moment because you always, I don't know if you know this, but every comedian is almost envious of musicians, right? Mm-hmm. Because with musicians, man, it's that feeling of having people sing back your music to it. It will never happen with jokes, right? It will never happen with jokes. And the thing with music is now they have a cheat code where these people can perform the same song at 20 different festivals. With you, you have to kind of fine tune it depending on which audience you're doing it for, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So
to have those little moments where the audience is kind of singing back to me, it's kind of like, oh, it's nice. It feels good. And it's an incredible feeling also because it means people are paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it means people are paying attention. They are with you and they understand what is happening. So it really was a good moment in the show.
No, I enjoyed it. And then I mean, you talked about it where you talked about your three, struggling with your faith and then sort of like trying to rectify it with the three blessings. I mean, I thought that was so beautiful. So we had that and then the ancestors bit. And then when you talked about the fuel shortages, I was just like, how genius is that? And then you linked it with then talking about, I like the fact that you weaved in, like Europe, UK politics, and the point that you said about the Dominic coming 3 hours. And
it was very confusing too. That was my entrance to British politics. I still remember that weekend. I was very confused.
No, British politics is something else. And my aunt said this when you are saying how, with African politicians, they'll literally, the corruption is just, they don't cover it. It's just there. And then we were reflecting and we were like, well, it's kind of like with UK, where the politicians are like, I'm not sure if it's a party. I'm going to wait for someone to tell me if it was a party. Where in Zim, they'll be like, yeah, it was a party. So
they will tweet the pictures themselves, like, we had a party. Where you guys were home. Shame. We were at a party. It's ridiculous. It's very ridiculous. But yeah, it was a joy. I can't quite remember a more beautiful moment than performing. I'm very grateful to Blawayo though, because I don't think the show would have been the way that it ended up being without the show in Blawayo. And I've always, for different reasons, and so many reasons, Blawayo is a very special city to me because my wife comes from the city. So in I feel that's what some of my people, they have, like, that's the nickname.
Yeah.
But creatively it's special to me because I still remember I have a friend of mine before my first show in the city back in 2018 who saw a poster and said, I see that you are going to perform in Blawayo. I wonder, like, what are you going to perform? Like, this person is not in Zim. They haven't been in Zim. They'd never seen me perform live. So their impression of my comedy was based on the few clips that I've seen. And I asked them what they meant. They're like, oh, it just seems to me like your comedy is more Harare comedy. And it really gave me thought. Like, I was like, man, I don't know whether to be offended. So when I went to the city, I was cognizant of that, right? I think subconsciously it even made me move things around. I was very conscious of that, and I went and performed. I still remember how the city embraced me. I will never forget that performance. Like, there was a lady in the front who was almost falling out of her chair. You have those moments where you're like, am I this funny? Like, the whole room was erupting. It was such a beautiful sight. I felt validated as a comedian because now I knew that in my mind, prior even to this, I was like, man, I don't think I do Harare jokes because I think being funny is, you should be universally funny. I think the jokes, I didn't write any Blawayo specific jokes to go there. I just carried because I believed the stuff was universal, and I got that validation. So, and then I went back again. I think that year I performed 3 times. And it was the same result every single time. And I remember one of the guys from the city was like, man, we don't even get this kind of reaction here. But it was, so I've always had that special relationship where even when I was preparing for conspiracy theories, I went and, did a show there, but it wasn't a proper show. So with this one, I was like, yo, my people, you deserve a proper show. Let's do this. It gave me an opportunity to see the show from the back end, to be like, okay, we've done the show, which is what comedy, which is what you should do anyway. You're supposed to go on tour, perform as many different places as possible, but we didn't have that kind of luxury. We didn't have that kind of time. It was in the middle of a pandemic. So, but the response, like, these people would have laughed even. They gave me that, it was incredible. So the show on the 24th was so much better because of that. There's nothing that I removed, but there's so many things that I added and moved around to be like, okay, this feels incomplete. This feels okay. Let's all right. The show is done. Let's take it to you, and I'll forever be grateful to them for giving me that opportunity.
Yeah. Always. No, and I like the fact that I think you had Jaha
Lezansi.
Yes. Yeah. As your opening act, and I think you had like a few musicians. And I just wanted to ask, what role does music play in your art? Because it really comes across the way you champion, some of these acts. And like, for example, when I hear that 007, like, I just think of you because I think of it on Sunday. What role does it play?
A huge role. If I wasn't a comedian, I'll probably be a struggling artist. I'll probably be trying to do something music-wise. I'm grateful I figured out what I'm good at. I'm very grateful for that. But I've always been a fan of music. That's my earliest and some of my fondest memories are from, are accompanied by music, from urban grooves to hip hop. Obviously, because of where I grew up, I was mostly exposed to local music, your Radio 3, from Radio 3 FM to Power FM, I could decide, when I was in high school, people knew to come to me to get the correct lyrics of songs. Like I was that encyclopedia, like, no, that's not what he says. He says A, B, C, D. I knew every song that needed to be known. I've always been a fan of music. So now, being able to do this now, it's kind of trippy because now I come across the people that I grew up looking up to, and they say like, yo, man, I enjoy your stuff. I'm like, what? I don't blush very often, but in those moments, I promise you, I remember bumping into Trevor Noah at Zinfest, and I know Trevor Noah, but he sees me, he's like, Madorofia. I'm like, what? So it's things like that. Like I've met at different points, your people that I used to still do look up to, your Tech Fires, your Leonard Mafumos, all these people that were incredible in shaping a young me. So now to be in a position where I'm like, okay, if I can in whatever little way, these are the people that I enjoy now, genuinely enjoy. I love me, Tanto Wavy, Votes, JT, your Sokoma Temais, your, Pro Beats, in fact, crazy thing, I don't know if people realize I've never done a show without Pro Beats. Like from conspiracy to like my relationship with Pro predates like from the first Madurifia social. That's how much of a fan I am of that guy. So it's that thing of our relationship is so intricate now where it's more like family, right? Yeah. Where if you come to a show that I'm doing, especially these ones that are meant to be televised, you're going to find Probe, even if you don't see him on the poster, he's going to be there somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's those things where I'm like, in whatever little way that I can, in a way, because I'm still trying to do my own stuff, like in a very selfish way. I'm still trying to promote me, but there's nothing wrong with trying to drag one or two people along, because you never know, you never know what, and I would hope, Kuti, they do that for somebody else. And I've seen them do, incredible things for. So it's like just trying to create that chain reaction. I grew up, the in a space where you really have to go out of your way to be unkind and selfish. If you grow up in an area, Kunukusna, Majuraho, like where people are literally shouting at each other over and sharing everything they can, you really have to go out of your way to be stingy, because where are you getting that from? So it's just trying to share that love, trying to make each other shine brighter, try to help wherever I can, but most of it is really just selfish. It's like, you guys need to hear what I'm hearing, because I mean, like, you hear 007, you're like, how is this not a national song?
Yeah.
Like, how is this not a national song? So that's really,
no, I love that. It kind of reminds me of, like, if you look at Dave Chappelle's crew, he's always kind of brought the same people. Donnell Rawlings,
exactly.
Omwini when he was alive, even though
Jeff Ross,
exactly. Like, it's kind of just bringing, and I'm sure he kind of looks at them and he's like, Donnell, you're so funny, because to me Donnell Rawlings is funny. I don't know if you've ever checked out his stuff, But
what do you mean that? What do you mean? I am a. So if there is something that I know in life, it's Dave Chapelle. Like, I am a ridiculous Dave Chapelle fan, and by that I mean the first time that I saw Bill Burr was in the Chapelle show. So people don't even realize, people will go back now and be like, oh snap, that's, if you watch that racial draft skit, that's Bill Burr. If you watch those Dice Championship, he's there in the, if most of the guys that I know from hip hop, I saw them first in the Chapelle show. So you're from your, you know, Charlie Murphy, Donnell Rawlings as Ashley Larry, from like Paul Mooney as Nostradamus, you know, from even what was I going to say? There's quite a few names that you're like, oh snap.
Lunel, wasn't Lunel part of it?
Yeah, so it's but from that, even Chapelle show comes after, you know, killing them softly, after I came, you know, because I enjoyed Killing Them Softly for what it's worth, and then came the Chapelle show. So that time when he was off, I was starving. I've watched almost every Dave Chapelle interview that is available on YouTube. as soon as it's available, I'm watching it. I follow the guy. Let me tell you, I follow the guy that is Dave Chappelle's official photographer.
Oh, I mean, that's standard for any fan.
so that's where I know, like, okay, Dave will post this later, but
I've seen it.
I've seen it. Okay, this is where Dave is going. You know, so even now to your micro shares, you know, it's incredible. And when you make, to a great extent, I've always tried to replicate the good things that I see in Dave Chapelle doing. So like, okay, how can I? Because it's being a fan now, it doesn't necessarily mean like we are agreeing on everything that you're doing. There's some things that I'll be like, hey, my God, here is this. But you know, I like to believe that he has had more moments in the light than in the dark, as all humans should strive to be. We all have our dark moments or our failings. Some failings are more public than others. I've been fortunate enough, like when I fail, it's me and my wife. She knows. My wife will see people who are saying, oh, Kandoro is incredible. And that day, particularly, maybe she's not feeling me because I've said something stupid. And she's like, if only people knew. So, you know, things like that. But we've had, you know, they are in the public sector. So it's things like that where the music, I see what is done with these guys. It's just trying to replicate that same formula. If we come up, we all come up. Kevin Hart has also done the same. You know, his guys are, but I also want you to see that it also comes from a place of selfishness where you're like, I want you guys to do well so that you don't bother me. You know, because if you are the only person successful in a crew of 8 people, like what's going to happen when misery befalls these people? They're going to come to you because you're the guy with the Netflix deal. But if these people have individual Netflix /HBO /Comedy Central deals, they will figure their own situations out.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of thinking where you're like, man, let's place each other in positions where we all do well.
Exactly. And I like the fact that you've talked about crews, because it leads me to talking about who I want to talk about, Trevor Noah. I'm a fan of his soft friend crew. I don't know if you know, like he's friends with this guy called Kaya Danga, Anele, Sizwe, and Kolisa. Like I have been, so I've been following those guys for years, and literally like every year they'll make America, they'll do this, and I'm like, oh my, they probably like speak maybe a few times. I'm making assumptions. I don't know.
Yeah.
They probably speak a few times a year and then they come together. I'm like, in my mind, I feel like I should be friends with them. I don't know.
Yeah. we all do. We all do.
I feel like I should be friends with them. But obviously, I'm sure they've supported each other in various. But I just like that they're all doing well in what they do. So I want to talk about Trevor Noah because I am a big Trevor Noah fan, right? And obviously, Trevor Noah is probably one of the few Africans that I know that literally they've gone clear, as the young Brits would say, like he's A star at this point. I'm correct, right? He's A star, right? He's hosted the Oscars.
There's you don't go more A star than that. Like you don't go more A lister than that.
Yeah, like Trevor Noah. But I was, a fan of his comedy. I remember when he was sort of starting out. There's a time when he used to come to the UK and I would go to these small clubs where Trevor Noah was performing. And I just always loved that, he would talk about Southern Africa and everyone that I knew, I'd be like, watch this guy. And like you, I like the fact that for the most part, the comedy is clean. Like it's like I was saying, like, I was watching your comedy with my aunt. Like sometimes you stand up, I'm not sure if I can watch this with the family. But I've always liked that about Trevor Noah as well. And obviously fast forward to now, he's the host of The Daily Show. And I mean, what big shoes to fill, like with Jon Stewart, him coming on there, and it shows his intellectual muscle and everything.
Yes.
But I used to see some things on social media. I don't see it as much, but where the sentiment used to be, and particularly maybe from Southern Africans, right? It's like, oh, I used to like Trevor's old stuff.
Yeah.
I don't really like his, because obviously like a lot of the newer, I haven't seen the latest one, but it was obviously, obviously he's been in America for a while, and it was, to a more international audience. You can't really talk about Zuma when only like 6% of the world knows who you're talking about or whatever. But so I kind of saw the sentiment. It's kind of like, oh, I used to be a fan of the old stuff. I'm not really a fan of, and it's really coming from us. When I say us, Southern Africans, sort of like his home base. There is a lot of celebrating him, but I do see that like, oh, I miss the old Trevor. Oh, Trevor sounds different. His accent. Oh, like that sort of stuff. And it just kind of made me think about, as a people, how do we allow someone to go clear, to go A-list, be global, celebrate them, and accept that they've evolved from the content that drew us in. I mean, how do we do that? And is it something that you sometimes think about, even with your work, in terms of, I always have to, this is my base crowd, because I feel like those people who critique him aren't allowing him to evolve. And I think there's a separate conversation around talent pool and how talent is nurtured in Africa. Obviously, South Africa is much more developed than Zim, for example, right? But if Trevor Noah if his content has changed, that's fine. It means that there should now be room for other people to take up the space that he was taking, to give that political critique, that political comedy. But I thought you were the best person to have this conversation with, seeing as you are a comedian as well. So yeah, just your open thoughts on the Trevor Noah story.
I honestly think I'm the best person to ask also, because I'm a huge Trevor Noah fan. So Trevor Noah and Dave are the two people that I've tried to model more Trevor Noah than Dave, to be honest, because if you notice, the stand-up propaganda is really trying to throw your head in a hypothetical ring. Just in case they ever thought this is my audition tape. But it's an interesting thing, right? And the short answer is really there's no way to do it. There's no good way to do it. And it's not really an African problem. Even if you look at Kanye West, how many people say I miss the old Kanye? As an artist grows, they are going to, there's no kind of way to say this, but as fans, we are entitled, right? There's people that I know that used to support me when it was just 150 coming, and then as soon as they started feeling like I had gone, there's, oh, Kandoro, there's a few messages that I didn't respond as quickly as they would have wanted, and then there's always that on any level. So much worse the Trevor Noah, there's the Trevor Noah level, where you ask me whether it's something that I think about. I do think about it, but I also don't think about